Bechoros Daf. Yesterday we were discussing that even the daughter is allowed to testify that the Bechor has a legitimate mum. Gemara asks whether or not Eid Mipi Eid works for the mum of Bechor. Can you have testimony that was heard from another testimony? Says the Gemara, Machlokes. According to Ravasi and Mireimar, it's no good, and the only time Eid Mipi Eid works is when we're trying to save an aguna, to testify about her husband. Rav Ashi and Rav Yemar say that it's kosher, and that's the halacha. And Mireimar actually called Rav Yemar Shari Bukhra. Yemar the Mekel, he's the Mekel, in a derogatory way. But the halacha is like Rav Yemar. Why? Because Rav Yemar and Rav Ashi hold that Eid Mipi Eid works in any situation that a woman is believed to testify. So since we pass in like Rav Shimon Gamliel, that even a daughter is allowed to testify about a mum, so Eid Mipi Eid works for the mum of a Bechor. Another famous sugi in Shas, Hapesha Asa Hapesha Hitir, Rav Eli says that if a person comes and says, this animal is a Bechor, and we had no idea that this animal is a Bechor, so he's the one, his mouth is what created the Isser, so his mouth could right away say, yes, and this Bechor has a mum. Now, we wouldn't be able to learn this halacha from the classic case of Hapesha Asa Hapesha Hitir, which is if a woman says, I was once upon a time an Eishes Ish, but I got divorced, without her opening her mouth, we would say that she's a Pnuya, but she's the one that created the Isser, so she creates the Heter. Because by us, we would say the reason why he took his animal to Rav is because he didn't want to be over on a kares, to eat kachim outside of Beis Hamikdash is kares. Nevertheless, we still say Hapesha Asa Hapesha Hitir. Why? Because he could get away from the kares without going to Rav. By creating a mum himself, if he punctured the ear, that's enough for him not to have kares. The fact that he went to the Rav, we say Hapesha Asa Hapesha Hitir. This is a story, a person rented his donkey out on condition that the renter doesn't take the donkey through the river that has water because the donkey could die. The renter, of course, didn't listen, went right through the water and the donkey died. He got back and he said, listen, I went through the river, but there's no water. Says Rav, he has a migui. He could have lied, he could have said, I took the donkey through the other river that had no water. Says Abaya, that's not a migui. Because since we know for certain that there's always water in this river, so it's a migui against the Edom. It's as if we have Edom and Anzahadi that there's water, therefore, we don't say that he's believed. It doesn't have a migui. On Leila Seder we say, Rabbi Lezer said, Harei ani kivim shimim shana. This story is the beginning of that story of Harei ani kivim shimim shana. Reb Tzadok was a kohen, and he had a suffix that he gave his animal to eat from a basket that cut its lip, and he wasn't sure if a Talmid Chacham is believed to say that the mum happened by itself. Rabbi Yeshua said he's believed. There's a difference between a Talmid Chacham and a regular person. Rabbi Gamliel said no, there's no difference. And Rabbi Tzadok said, but wait a minute, Rabbi Yeshua told me there is a difference. So Rabbi Gamliel called him Rabbi Yeshua. He said, let's wait for the Talmid Chachamim. He said, Rabbi Yeshua, stand up. And they asked the Talmid Chachamim, and Rabbi Yeshua said, no, I take it back. According to Rashi, he took it back. According to Taisvis, it's obvious that he didn't take it back because we pass him like Rabbi Yeshua and Brachas as well. Akol Panim, Rabbi Gamliel made Rabbi Yeshua stand up, continue standing, and the Olam over there wasn't happy for the fact that he was standing, that Rabbi Gamliel made him stand, and that was part of the reason why they removed Rabbi Gamliel. Because in two other situations they did the same thing, and they removed Rabbi Gamliel and they put Rabbi Lezer to be Rosh Yeshiva, and that's where they brought in 400 benches, and Rabbi Lezer said, Arei ani kivem shim shana. But once the people said to Chutzpis HaMeturgaman, who was one of the Asar Arugim Malchus, they said, stop saying shir, so he stopped, and therefore Rabbi Yeshua was able to sit. Says in the Mishnah, a kohen is believed to say, I took this animal to a chacham, and the chacham paskin to me that it's a real mum. Why? Because we're not chosheh that the kohen is going to eat kachim outside of Beis Hamikdash. Without this mum, it's not right. But not because of the reason that, because at the end of the day, we could go and find out that he's a liar and he's worried about that. That's not the reason. Rav says that a person is believed to say, the kohen is believed to say that the Yisrael gave it to him with a mum. Why? Because over here we say, because at the end of the day we could find out from the Yisrael it's not true, and that's the halacha, even though Rabbi Yirmiyah says that he's not believed. If somebody says to a shaliach who is not very good with keeping meiser. He says, I want you to go get me fruit that's kosher. It's good meiser. So he's not believed to say that he bought kosher food, meiser food, even though it's asilis galis. We're going to find out at the end that he lied. Why? Because he could always get away with it. He could say, I went to the store, I thought that they were kosher. They're really not kosher, but I thought they were. But if the sender says, I want you to go specifically to that person, then he is believed, because that person is going to put fear in him. He's going to be worried that he might go ask that person afterwards and he'll find that he's a liar. The Gemara says a story. Rafram was a Yisrael. He gave his bechar to a kohen. This kohen turned out to be a big mechutzah. The Gemara says he did two chutzpahs. Chutzpah number one is he created a mum in the animal. Chutzpah number two was that when Rafram got sick and he couldn't see very well, this kohen brought the animal to Rafram to ask him if it's kosher or not, if it's a good mum. And Rafram forced his eyes open and he recognized his animal. He said, "What's going on here?" Says Gemara. Nevertheless, Rafram didn't say that all kohanim are chashed. That guy happened to be mechutzav. A Yisrael that says, I gave my bechar to the kohen and it had a mum, he's believed. And the chiddush is, even if the animal grew and it's bigger and he doesn't recognize him anymore, we say that he does recognize and he's believed. A Yisrael who asks a chacham about a mum, if it's not a permanent mum, it's a mum that you need a chacham for, it's hard to see. So the chacham cannot answer him unless there's a kohen with him. Why? Because we're concerned that yes, although this individual is worried about eating kachim outside the Beis Hamikdash, but he's not so worried about Geneva, he doesn't care about Geneva. So he'll steal the animal from the kohanim. Once he hears that it has a mum, then he'll say, I could eat it myself, anybody could eat such an animal. Now, if the mum is a very serious mum, so you don't need a kohen. Why? Because why is this individual going to the chacham? Only to give him kavod. So somebody that's careful about the kavod of a chacham is also going to be careful on Geneva. When it comes to meiser behema, even the owners believe to say that this mum was there beforehand, because if he wanted to, he could create a mum in every single one of his animals and he wouldn't have to give meiser, because before you take the animals out through the pen, they don't have any kedusha and there's no isser to create a mum. But to say that I'm going to make sure that this particular animal is going to go through the pen, that's isser deraisa. That we're not concerned about, but we're concerned that he'll make them all bali mum, and therefore he's believed to say that this animal had a mum beforehand. Says the Mishnah that you're allowed to shech the bechar if he has a mum. And how do you know that he has a mum? You give it to a mumcha, to a professional. If there's no professional, says the Gemara, you give it to, the Mishnah says, you give it to 3 people that are not, just 3 laymen, not Tamid Chachamim. The Mishnah calls them B'nei Knesses. Rava says that that's only, they're believed in a mum kavua, that's an obvious mum, but a mum that you need a mumchishkeit, you need a mumcha. Rava says no, 3 people is not enough, even 23 is not enough. You always need a mumcha. When it comes to Hataras and Darim, a yachim mumcha could be matan neder, and if there's no mumcha, then you give it to the 3 B'nei Knesses. The review says one of the 3 has to be a chacham and as good and as smart as chacham as Rav Nachman. And the other 2 can't just be anybody, they have to be on a level that if you explain to them the halachas and nedarim, they'll get it and they'll understand it. Have a wonderful day.